tuning in from. My name is Yolanda Gonzalez, and like Lindsay said, I'm based in New York City. And I'm with the Cornell Cooperative Extension Team, Harvest, New York. And so in today's presentation, I'll be providing an overview of what is extension for those who aren't familiar, as well as just what is urban agriculture, what does it look like? We worked on a research project that we presented in the International Agritourism Conference in Bolzano in May. So I'll be sharing some of those results just to give you a picture of sort of the differences between rural and urban ag, if you're curious about that. We'll look at a few key differences in agritouristic activities, and we'll be exploring a few case studies and reviewing those case studies to see what distinguishing features they have and how it sets it apart from rural traditional agritourism. We'll also be talking about opportunities and barriers, as well as an announcement for a call for case studies. So for those that aren't familiar, extension is essentially an extension of the university. So working for Cornell Cooperative Extension, we work to translate the latest research-based findings to our agricultural communities. There's an extension office in every county of New York State. There's about 60 offices throughout the state. And we provide technical assistance and educational programming for our producers. So for those that aren't familiar, these are sort of like the hotspots of urban ag throughout the state. So the major urban centers, obviously the biggest one being New York City, but there's also Albany, Buffalo, Troy, Utica, a few hotspots where there's more urban agritouristic activities happening. And so for our research project, we were looking at the differences between New York City urban agritourism and New York State rural agricultural enterprises, essentially. This map here shows a distribution of the non-commercial and the commercial urban operations. They also, it's an overlay with community gardens and more nonprofit farms. So as you can see, there's a higher concentration in northern Manhattan and southern Bronx, as well as northern Brooklyn, and a lot of operations in the Lower East Side. And just to give you a sense of like comparison, right? Throughout New York State, you have over 33,000 operations, and there's about 20% that have farms with agritourism. In New York City, there's about 1,900 operations, but this also includes school gardens, nonprofit farms, different types of operations. And there's about 3% that would identify themselves as having a farm with agritourism. And so if you look at the distribution of what kind of activities are happening on these in these spaces, a lot of them, you know, it comes down to the traditional like tours, recreation and education, a few special events, classes. I'll be talking about the importance of education and marketing education in agritourism, in urban agritourism specifically, as well as new farmer training, centering on themes like food justice and urban ag cultivation, culinary activities, and I'll show a few examples of that in New York City. So one great example that I love is Oko Farms, and they are in Williamsburg. This grower has their own YouTube channel, so they're driving engagement and awareness about their operation. They're kind of enticing folks with free education, and if they want to take a deeper dive into aquaponics, they can take a course, right? So for this upcoming summer, as you can see here on their flyer, they have a workshop series. And so, you know, for a certain amount, for a certain program fee, you can participate in this introduction to aquaponics and participate in person and learn hands-on. And that educational piece is really important to their business model in terms of promoting agritourism on their operation. In addition to education around aquaponics, there's also education around bee biology and bee conservation. So this a women-led group, this nonprofit organization called Island Bee Project, they advertise on Airbnb experiences, or at least they have in the past. This is like a previous example because I tried to find them recently and I couldn't find them. But they also have a really strong Instagram social media following, as well as a strong web presence, and really do a great job with storytelling. Their mission is clear. They have great photos. They work with children. And so they have that, again, the educational component where they're reaching out to school groups and different corporate events and just individuals that want to learn about urban bee production, right? You don't get a chance to do that every day in New York City. So again, I'll be talking about different marketing platforms, and Airbnb experiences is just one of a few different ones that producers can tap into to market. Another example is Mio My Farms. They are an indoor mushroom cultivation and microgreens production in the Bronx. What I appreciate about their website is that it's very clear that you can order microgreens online and you can order a farm tour, right? Like they incorporated it into their ordering system on their website. So you can, order package of microgreens and you can also purchase a farm tour for $10. So it's a pretty accessible price point. Again, they work with school groups and it's part of their business model to generate that income. Another example, so we talked about sort of commercial ag, and just to give you an overview and some background, when I say commercial, I'm meaning $1,000 or more in produce sales a year. But there's also, like I mentioned, school gardens, community gardens, and this example is a community garden called Rivers Run that advertises through TripAdvisor. So in addition to Airbnb experiences, there's also other marketing platforms that you can, post about your community garden and potentially generate additional revenue through tours or educational programming. In this case, the Bronx Food and Farm Tours is one example of a mission-led or mission-themed farm tour, right? So they're centering environmental justice as a main theme in their tours and their public outreach. Another example, which is a bit more on the tech side, is Farm One. And Farm One is this is a new space. They were originally an indoor hydroponic farm below a restaurant in the basement. And they sort of outgrew that space and decided to get a bigger space. And this space, I just went to an event the other day and it was really jam-packed and crowded. What I liked about it is that it has outdoor space. They also have a kitchen area where they have cooking classes and dinners. They also partner with local breweries who incorporate what they grow into their beverages and their drinks. So there's that component of using the farm products in whatever they sell, either at the store or in their bar area, kitchen bar area. Another example of like a nonprofit farm that has this type of programming is Harlem Grown. They have a garden cocktail series in the summer. They have somebody that comes out and kind of teaches them how to make these specialty drinks and incorporating, again, what's grown at the garden, either harvesting fresh herbs, flowers, and incorporating that into the recipes as they're demonstrating and making it live in person. And then this isn't a really well-known case study. I think a lot of you may be familiar with Brooklyn Grange if you have been to New York City. But a lot of their business model is centered around events, whether that's volunteer corporate events where companies pay for their employees to come out and volunteer on the farm. Or in this case, it could be anything from a micro wedding that's like a smaller guest size and maybe a few hours to a more large event upwards of 100 guests. As you can see, those are some of the price points that they start at. And so all those different programs, they again try to incorporate farm products, whether it be fresh food that's grown on the rooftop that's incorporated into the dining and the catering part, or maybe it's part of the tour and people do a little tasting or something. So it's all within the theme of agritourism and agritouristic activities. And this is another example in Brooklyn, Hattie Carthon. They have a lot of times, events that are related to like cultural programming, whether it be like a farmer's market. They also have a stand where they sell products there, whether it be like postcards or other farm products. They have cooking demos. What's great about this particular operation is that they work with youth. And so they have a youth training program, and it's again, sort of like teaching about these entrepreneurship opportunities and how to go about setting up, an agritourism operation. What does it take to put on these events, and teaching youth all the steps to make that happen. Another example is Kelly Street. Again, having culturally based events. They have a sofrito con bomba. So, there's a large Hispanic population, and working with culturally appropriate foods and cooking demos and health and wellness workshops. So this is just an example of the type of diversity of cultural programming that can happen that's all related within the field of urban agritourism, because again, they're incorporating what they're using from the farm and doing that in public event programming. Some barriers for agritourism. So while all of these are, successful examples, a lot of these operations don't consider themselves to be agritourism. So there's also like a labeling issue. But there is growing recognition of urban ag, even though sometimes these operations are hard to find because they're either on a rooftop or they're tucked away behind a fence and people don't really know what's going on. So it's not as like visible as like you're driving down a highway and you see a sign and you decide to park and, go to a farm, like as you would in a rural context. So, but there is increased visibility on these travel and tourism platforms, like I mentioned earlier. There's also more support, whether it be through the Mayor's Office of Urban Agriculture. They support economic development for businesses and urban farms and community gardens. And New York State is open to considering the value of urban agriculture as an agritourism driver and contributor, because I think that language and framing and how deciding to view these events and these programming through an agritourism lens, it helps to legitimize these practices and these offerings. But again, New York State is having, doesn't necessarily consider current agricultural tourism to include urban ag. So that's something that we're exploring and hoping to promote. Access to capital is also an issue, a reliance on local government, space. So there's only so much that you can grow for specific events and things like that, or just to feed a certain amount of people. So intensive production is usually, the way that these operations go about their farm planning. And again, there's limited awareness of urban ag and the fact that it's even possible to go to these programs or to know like what farms are close by. But some trends and considerations just to tie everything together from the case studies that we've already reviewed. So we talked about marketing platforms, TripAdvisor, Airbnb experiences, but also Eventbrite is a great way for people to learn about what's happening in their area, because a lot of times they can either sign up for similar events. So if they go to one, they can sign up for others in the future that are similar to that type of event. Social media, it's a great way to collaborate with other partner organizations, whether you tag them in a post or a story. And then a few things to consider are providing a sliding scale for admission, just to make it more accessible to a lot of different audiences that might, maybe they want to go, but they can't, afford the ticket price to an event. Language interpretation and signage. This is an example with NYRP. They have a lot of their signage on their demonstration farm, both in English and Spanish. And having that just creates more accessibility for, let's say, tours and things like that you want to do in multiple languages. Collaborating with like-minded or partners, I mentioned that already, a strong web and social media presence. And a few of the characteristics that kind of set urban agritourism apart from rural-based agritourism is a lot of times what's offered on urban farms have a social justice or environmental justice lens. And a lot of times they're mission-driven, they're educational. So like the aquaponics intensive courses that I talked about earlier, those are all examples of marketing education. And finally, another characteristics that I think sets urban ag apart is the focus on environmental sustainability, whether it be talking about soil health or intensive growing methods, pollination, IPM, all those things are sort of part of like the discussion in a tour. So like a lot of times if you do a Brooklyn Grange tour, they'll talk about their soil health practices and what they're doing to prevent soil erosion and to fight pests. So a lot of times it's talking about their values and their mission in alignment with environmental sustainability. And then finally, we are calling for case studies with CABI. So if you want to take a screenshot or just a photo of this QR code, we're hoping to collect by the end of the year. If feel free, I have in the next slide my email there if you have any questions and want to reach out about that. And we also have an Instagram page where we also post about upcoming events. So it's urbanag.nyc. So that's all I have.